All right, guys, so this is 3.5 pounds. I'm using a new clay by Standard. The number is 800. Can't remember what it's called, but Angel, our favorite manager over here in Lodi, New Jersey, former delivery guy. Now he's super big wig over there. He recommended this clay. It's chestnut, but it's got some speckles in it. So we're gonna see how it throws. My last few videos I used it. I think I like it. Let's see, we're going a little bigger with this one. Let's see how elastic it is. So I'm gonna go ahead, 3.5 pounds, not super fast. Remember, the speedier wheel is gonna facilitate whatever you're doing, and if your wheel's going too fast and you mess up, it's gonna extra mess you up. So you wanna go a little slower, hand on the back here. I always start with the back here. The other hand is sort of just making it stick. But remember, I don't wanna go flat. Always keep it in this sort of, tell the clay it's gonna go up. Now I'm gonna cone up. I've got several videos about that, but I'll kind of start. Wrist attached to my forearm, attached to my pelvis bone, attached to my body. So this is gonna push the clay towards the center. I'm gonna use these 4 fingers, and the motion is this. I'm gonna scoop with my pinky and my ring fingers, speed up a little bit. The clay has nowhere else to go but to go up, and I'm gonna cone it up. Now again, I don't care if the cone is centered. All I care about is isolating small bits as I go down. So I'm gonna start to cone down. My motion of coning down, I won't go through it really too much, is going down, that mushroom comes out, this hand reels it back in. So down and in, maybe pop some air bubbles along the way. I know the bat's ticking. Having a bat issue in America, the company went out of business, so I have to use the plastic bat, of which I don't like, because one hole's bigger than the other. So what I've talked about is when that ticking happens, it's because the bat's moving back and forth. You can do one of 2 things, or both. Find a dry clay rock, stick it in the bigger hole. What that's gonna do is give you some time before it gets wet so that the bat doesn't move anymore. I'm sorry, you could do one of 3 things. Buy a bat mate. We bought the cheaper version online. They seem to be fine. They're those felt things that go underneath. That's been helping our members a little while we solve this shortage of bat problem in America. Put the rock in the hole, or go ahead and let the ticking happen until you get most of the clay in the middle. And then all you gotta do is change the center of your bat. So what I mean by that is right now, my hand is pushing the clay down, and it's causing the bat to go back and forth with my back hands. But if while it's ticking, once you get it close to center, just pull this back hand just a little back. Just a little bit. Keep it as steady as possible. Now you have a new sort of floating center. So there's the ticking. Pull my left hand back. A little bit of ticking, but nothing major. And just keep your hand still and slowly take your hands off. All right, so now this is 3 pounds. I'm gonna go down with 2 thumbs mushed together, and I'm gonna use the stems of my fingers. Elbows are down, bracing around the outside, but don't squeeze because we don't wanna wipe the clay away. We just wanna brace ourselves. Again, it's 3.5 pounds, so I can't really lean down, but my elbows are firm into my body. Something I've realized recently, because I've been teaching more, is I'm constantly pulling my arms back into my core. So you're constantly making this stronger, especially when you're trimming, when you're centering, when you're using your pin tool underneath to get the excess. We're pulling our elbows towards our core. That's gonna make our arms a lot stronger. So I'm gonna go down with a bunch of thumbs, 2 thumbs and stems. My fingers starting to get dry, wet my hands. The stems of my thumbs are also compressing. I'm gonna go with a no foot situation here, by the way. The stems of my thumbs, you'll see all the clay coming off, is also compressing this. So sometimes this starts to bead up a little bit. This is gonna push it back in. Let's see how much clay I'm gonna leave down on the bottom. I'm gonna go with, here's a ruler, with 1/4 of an inch. No foot, 1/4 of an inch. Remember, the wire tool is gonna take a little bit off. Now, I'm gonna make a little bit of a picture that sort of looks a little sexy. I'm gonna have it go straight up, because you wanna know before you start. You have to know how wide that bottom is gonna be. Because your sexy pot, your pitcher, anything that's shaped, has a core structure to the middle of it. It's usually a cylinder. So what I wanna do is create the walls that go like this, and then I can go ahead and start to shape it to give it the form that I want. But the first goal is to stack those clay grains going straight up so that your walls are even. So I don't want the inside to be really wide. I want it to be narrow on the bottom. So I'm only going to open up about 3 inches. I'm going to go towards scoop and come out. I'm going to compress that floor maybe just once. I mean, no one's going to see the inside, so if I compress it a lot and get it really groggy, it doesn't make a difference. Now, since I want this to have a narrow neck, I'm going to do what I call the claw. I want to tell the clay that it's going to be narrow up here, but I don't want to lose the width that I have on the bottom. So the way that I do that is I again lock my elbow in. Sorry, a motorcycle gang just drove by. Some sort of motorcycle gang here in Madison, New Jersey. We don't have motorcycle gangs, but a lot of motorcycles just came by. So my arm is here, right? My hand's sort of holding the outside. I'm going to use the palm of my hand and I'm going to push the clay in, and then with the rest of my hand, I'm just going to ease the clay forward. So what that does is it's going to leave the bottom being about 3 to 4 inches wide, but it's going to sort of collar this in, telling the clay that eventually it's going to be narrow. Wheels going fast, heel of my hand pushing, lean forward. Now you can see my fingers drop over, but I'm not using my fingertips at all. And now my clay is wide on the bottom, but it's narrow on top. Get the water out again. Now you're going to notice this arm is flying up here, but what you may not notice is that it's pushing up against this hand, which is leaning on my elbow. If I do this, that arm is not as strong. But I push this arm up against it. Now this isn't stuff that I consciously do, everybody. And I don't even notice I do it until I'm teaching. But that's gonna keep this arm stable. So now I'm gonna start to scoop. I slow down my wheel a little bit. That's why I always recommend that we keep our foot on the pedal, because again, I don't notice that I do this intentionally, and I didn't notice that I slow my wheel down a little. So I wanna get under here and I wanna really push those clay grains underneath. And now I'll speed up my wheel, and I'm gonna start to build up. Ignore the ticking. Just recently someone complained about the ticking of my bat being distracting, and I apologize. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw some of this very hard clay in here. It doesn't bother me, but I don't want it to bother you. So you can see I just broke off a piece of clay here. And it may be even a little too big, so I'm gonna take my wood tool and break it into pieces. I'm gonna shove it into that bigger hole. Now we want to make sure that we don't get these hard pieces in our pot. So I'm gonna, once I shove it in here, I'm gonna sort of clean it away. So I made a mess. That hard rock of clay getting in there is just gonna be the same as an air bubble. So now it moves a lot less. It gives me some time before it gets wet and malleable. All right, we go back to our regular program. So we're gonna go down to the bottom again, hang out down there for a little bit, give myself a little bit of ledge. Now what my inside hand did was it waited patiently for my outside hand to meet it. But what it didn't do was it didn't push down on the floor. If it's pushing down on the floor or dragging on the floor, then you get that moat on the inside that gives you a spot of your clay that's a little too thin. Or it gives you somewhere for the glaze to pool. But all you gotta do is while that inside hand is inside, waiting for that outside hand, you don't wanna be touching the floor. But you do want to hold its ground. You want to make sure that it's still keeping that 4 inches wide, because if it's not, then that inside gets to have its way too much and it goes in, and then your pot starts to sort of tornado. Again, we want to make sure we have a thick lip, compressing every time. Slow down on the bottom, scoop under, and start to build up. Now, if you wanted this to be a really bulbous, sort of wide round pot, then we want to keep those walls a little thicker, because if we want to stretch it out to, 8 inches, then you need the amount of material for it to become 8 inches. But here's the deal. I personally don't think that anyone uses a pitcher. Unless it's a Tupperware, plastic, lucite pitcher. When you put any sort of fluid in a pitcher, it is way too heavy to use. So unless you're doing a creamer or a gravy boat, but when you get to bigger pitcher, I guarantee you're never gonna physically use it. So it really just becomes something to put flowers in. So I really am not as concerned with the thickness and weight, but that's just my opinion. If you use a pitcher at home made of clay, well then, mazel. All right, now this clay is going straight up, but I want it to be narrow. So now we're gonna collar up. Now you're gonna see a lot of people do this. The problem with this is that one hand may be higher than the other, and one, they may not be lined up. The other problem is you're touching it with way too many fingers, and you're giving the clay way too much information, and you're rubbing away clay in different areas. So a couple of things. When you collar, your hands have to be attached. A collar around your neck is 2/3 around your neck, not 2 pieces of material on each side of your neck. So your hands need to be attached. When I use full hands, I'm really just using this part of my hand. I'm not using every finger. So if I was gonna use 2 hands, my hands are gonna be wet. I'm doing nothing down here. I'm gonna start to go up, and then those middle fingers attached to the ring of clay will come up and close up. The other way of collaring is thumb, knuckle to knuckle, fingertips. So 6 points. And that's gonna give me a little bit more of a detail. So on the bottom, I'm gonna do nothing, wheels going fast and wet, my hands going fast, and then here, I close up those fingers and I come off like that. And that sort of tells the clay it's gonna go in. So I'm gonna go in here again, and now I'm gonna start to think about the shape of my pot. So I know that I want it to be a little narrower on the bottom, and as I start to go up, I want it to have a little bit more of a shoulder. And now I want it to go in a little bit, because this is, I'm gonna have a little bit of a neck to my pitcher, and then I'm gonna loosen up at the lip. So you may have seen a little skip there. I wanted to make sure that this was still on the screen. I once made a bottle video and the neck was not in the video. All right, so now I'm gonna go down in here again. I'm gonna try and get this clay into that pot. And I'm gonna start to pull it up. My wheel's going a little slower, but not where I can think too much. Scoop under that shoulder. Oop, got a little thin there. Now I'm gonna go in a little bit, and now I'm gonna create the neck of my pitcher going straight up. And again, I'm gonna loosen up at the lip. I need that lip to be thick this whole time. I'm gonna fix that little bump there. Here I need a little bit more extra strength, so I use my fingertip. Now I'm gonna go straight up, and I'm gonna ignore the lip. Now, this is when we start to pay attention to the pitcher part of this, right? So at this point now, I've created this like neck here. This is gonna be a wide open neck. And now I want to start telling the clay that this is where the water is gonna start. So, I'm gonna go down to the bottom again, because I never just start in the middle. I'm not doing much, I'm just sort of finessing, getting a head start on the bottom. There's that weird thin spot I created, try and hang out there for a little bit. Thin out my neck a little, or my shoulder, sorry. I'm gonna define the neck. I do that with my fingernail. Now I'm gonna go straight up, and then right here is when I wanna start to go out a little bit. I'm leaving my thick lip. So I'm gonna define it a little better for you. And you'll see that I'm starting to sort of V it out a little bit. Or that's the neck. I like to give myself definitive sections so that it looks intentional. Again, just me. Jolly and Hoff said, my instructor said to always make it look like, or my mentor in clay always said to make it look intentional, like not accidental. That's just, I don't know. Something's bothering me, but we're just gonna let it go for the sake of the video. All right, so what I've done now is I have given this sort of a spot for that water to start getting a heads up. I'll pick the pot up so you can see. I think my lip, that's what it was. My lip was uneven. Let's fix that a little bit. We're not gonna take a lot off, just a little. Does that make you feel better, guys? Feels like it makes me feel better. Now you just have to re-round her out over here. Something here bothers me. All right, this is my thinking as I start to make stuff. But all right, we're just gonna leave it. Yeah, I don't know what I did wrong. I'm sure if when I edit this video, I'll go, oh, that's where I messed it up. All right, so now I've got this thick lip, or thicker lip, like a bead of clay on the top. I cut some off, so that kind of messed with me a little. And my lip right here, this ledge tells the clay that it's gonna start to sort of the water's gonna start to go there. And I wanna get rid of a bunch of this. I look at the inside, I see how much extra clay I have. I have a little bit extra than what I wanted, so we're gonna cheat a little and take quite a bit off. So although this was 3 pounds, 13 ounces, I will be honest and tell you that I'm probably taking 3 ounces off. So, now, I will be able to trim this because the lip is gonna be level. So if you ever make a picture because it accidentally is uneven on one side of the lip, chances are you're gonna have a hard time trimming it because it's not gonna be level on the top. But this method is going to end up being level because it is sort of gonna be a cylinder, but we won't have a problem flipping it upside down because, all right, my glasses just fell down. I don't know, something's bothering me, but either way, for purpose of a picture, you kind of gonna get the idea. So you can see that, lip on top there. I think you should be able to see it. That ledge right there is gonna be where the water starts. Now, I don't want to make the picture part of this yet. The clay is too wet. If I go and try and move it, it's gonna bounce back or it's gonna stick to your fingers because it's wet. So I do let this sit for about an hour. I don't want it to be leather hard. I just don't want it to be tacky. I want it to be soft to move, so I don't want it to crack. But then I also, again, I want it to hold its shape. And when we mess up our pots when they're a little dry, and we always try and fix it, and then it goes back to what we want, it's because of that memory thing. So we want to take advantage of the memory, and we want to do it on purpose. All right, I don't know. We'll see what's bothering me. So that's the beginning part of a pitcher. 3.5 pounds now because I took off so much. Thicker lip, and we're gonna hopefully, with this crappy weather on Memorial Day weekend, this will dry in about an hour, and I'll be able to show you how I made that pitcher lip. So, have a great holiday. Bye.